Let's give you a sense of our election intelligence dashboard to explain the turnout figures. Turnout, as I said, could become key in these 121 constituencies. In 2010, it was 52%. Nitish had swept the election with the BJP. In 2015, he was with Lalu Prasad. It went up to 56%. Stayed there in 2020, an election held against the backdrop of COVID. This time, look at the jump, at least 9% and counting. This is huge, even by any standards. There is another critical factor which I want to point out, gender. In 2010, there was a 10% difference between men and women. Women are in pink there, the men in blue, 55 to 45. By 2015, it went to 20%. 20% more women voted than men. And in 2020, it was 18. This could be partly because a lot of men are migrant workers who go out and don't come and vote. We still don't have the gender gap for 2025, but that could prove crucial. I want to use this, therefore, to go to my guests. Amitabh Tiwari is joining me, founder Vote Vibe. Sandeep Shastri of Lok Niti is joining me. And I'm also joined by Yashwant Deshmukh of C Voter. Okay, I want to go to them to understand what this means, the high voter turnout. Amitabh Tiwari, a 10% gap between 2020 and 2025. What's your first impression of it?
No, it's a huge turnout. And essentially, I mean, we have seen that a higher turnout could either mean a pro-incumbency or an anti-incumbency as well. While a lower turnout generally points to a pro-incumbency because voters do not feel enthused enough to go out and vote or do not see opposition having the mettle to defeat the incumbent. But I would say the key number, as you mentioned, will be the number of the female turnout versus the male turnout. If the female turnout versus the male turnout is equal to the historical average of, let's say, 3 or 5%, or even higher, then it could point to good news for the NDA, especially the JDU. The JDU in the past has had a very high strike rate on seats where the female turnout is more than male. In 2010, it actually won 79 out of 115 on seats where women turnout was higher than male. In 2015, 61 out of 71, and in 2020, 37 out of 43. So the probability of JDU doing well increases significantly in seats where the female turnout is high, because largely we need to understand the impact of the Mahila Rozgar Yojana. And as we've seen in Maharashtra, as per CSDS poll study, 22% Muslims voted for Mahayuti. 22% Muslims. And I can assume that the females would have voted in higher numbers, and that led to almost a 3/4 sweep for the Mahayuti. So I see even a section of the Muslim Yadav women voting silently, perhaps, for the NDA if the female turnout happens to be much higher than the male turnout. And that could prove decisive, because in our Vote Vibe survey, we had shown that around 6% females had said that they could shift from a Jan Suraj or an others to or Mahagathbandhan to NDA if they receive the rupees 10,000 cash income support scheme.
Sandeep Shastri, your first reactions to this high voter turnout. We still don't have the gender skew, so it could well be that men also have voted in large numbers, but a 10% rise is almost unprecedented. How much of this could be attributed to the SIR exercise, which brought down the overall votes in Bihar down by about 45 lakhs? Is it a function of that, or does this show a very competitive election?
Rajdeep, a 10% and still counting rise in voter turnout is phenomenal, unprecedented, and something that will be a major issue in this election. What is causing this 10% increase? I think it's a little too early to say. Is it the gender vote? Is it the youth vote? Or is it the mobilization anti-incumbency, mobilization pro-incumbency? because there is no empirical data to show that higher voter turnout either helps the incumbent or helps the challenger. But Rajdeep, I'll make just two quick points on the issues which I think we need to look at. One, I would agree with Amitabh ji for all the points he made. The only added point I would make is woman vote is critical this time, and as you have said yourself in the earlier election, the gap between support for the Mahagathbandhan and NDA was not that significant in the women vote last time. Women vote was higher than men vote, but women vote decidedly in favor of one of the alliances was not very strong. Will that happen this time? And if it does, would it be because of the transfer that happened to women in terms of support?
Cash transfer.
Or will it happen because of the promise that the Mahagathbandhan has made? For me, equally important, Rajdeep, is the youth vote. We have been saying that the youth have not been as enthusiastic in the past in Bihar. I think this higher voter turnout may be an expression of a higher percentage of youth coming out and voting. Because youth have issues. Yeah, youth have issues of jobs within the state. Youth have issues of skill development opportunities in the state. So is this a vote in that direction? And again, it is very difficult to say at this stage whether, even if it is on employment and on education, who is it likely to favor, the Mahagathbandhan or the NDA? I think it's a little difficult to really track that at the moment. But definitely, a 10% plus increase is something that is going to create a dramatic change in the politics of the state.
You know, it's very interesting when you're looking at the MY. It used to be Muslim Yadav. It's now spoken about as Mahila and Yuva. Yashwant Deshmukh of C Voter, what's your sense? The highest voter turnout for 20 years, what does it mean for Bihar in your view?
Well, Rajdeep, as we know that we have seen way too many elections where high turnout ended up being anti-incumbent, high turnout ended up being pro-incumbent as well. So I need to wait to see the gap between male and female turnout, as we have been discussing so far. If this turnout is higher among the female, then it might be going one way. If it is among the male, it is higher on the other side, it will be going the other way. However, one thing I want to say, Rajdeep, is that overall upswing of the turnout is a very, very good sign for the health of the democracy, number one. It says that people at large have full faith in the process of democracy and the elections. And by and large, so far as my consumption of news is concerned, the day has gone largely uneventful, meaning not really much of the news that the Bihar was known for decades during the election day. Nothing of that sort has come so far in my knowledge, So apart from the partisan thing that some people might say their party is winning, some people might say it is good for anti-incumbency, good for pro-incumbency. I see this largely as a reaffirmation of people's faith in the electoral democracy and electoral process of India.
Amitabh Tiwari, the interesting aspect is that normally when we spoke about Bihar elections 20-25 years ago, we would look at the violence meter. By that reckoning, violence has certainly reduced considerably in Bihar. But what we are seeing in Bihar, obviously, which has not changed, is the frozen caste identities. Is that also going to be a critical? When we look at high turnout, we are also going to have to look at which caste groups have come out in large numbers, particularly Dalits and lower EBCs, extremely backward castes. Should we also look very closely at that?
Of course, as Sandeep ji mentioned, and we've discussed, so now we've added a youth to the Mahila, and there are, of course, now these caste considerations also, including the socio-economic class. Have the poor and the marginalized sections turned up in higher numbers, or has the middle class and the, let's say, the rich class, which is less in number in Bihar, turned up in higher numbers? See, Rajdeep, I think there is one misconception which we need to clear, is that the number of voters in Bihar Bihar compared to 2020 have increased. They have not declined. So this increase in turnout is essentially an increase in real turnout. It is not an increase just because the 8% names have been deleted from the voter list. So that we should be very clear. There were 7.36 crore voters in 2020. Currently, they are 7.42. And if the turnout is 65%, of course, it's not phase two, then it means that significantly higher number of people are turning up to vote. Correct. And it is also probably an indication, and there could be question marks, whether this SIR vote chori campaign has really worked or not if a very high number of people are having belief and trust in our democratic process and turning out in larger numbers.
Final word from you, Sandeep Shastri. If you are a betting man, and I know you're not, but over your long history of tracking elections, normally what does a high voter turnout indicate? Is there any clear pattern discernible, or is this generally a nationwide trend that every election is seeing higher and higher voter turnout?
Rajdeep, the only trend indicated which has been pointed out by Yashwantji, I think it is a stamp very decisively supporting the democratic process, and the voter of Bihar, she is asserting herself. He is playing a crucial role in saying my voice is important. How is it likely to sway in terms of the electoral result? I think that for me at least, there are two factors which are critical: the woman factor and the youth factor, and both these factors cut across caste. When you talk of caste, I think the woman factor in caste, the youth factor in caste becomes important. And I think how these two play out, as Yashwantji has been saying, if you have a higher male turnout, it could be indicative of greater support for the Mahagathbandhan. You have a significantly higher women turnout, it could be a support for NDA. Youth vote is still very difficult to really talk about. I would say the youth vote swing would depend upon the caste factor also. Which caste group are you talking about among the youth? And I think these two factors, which you popularly call X factors, are what will shape, I think, the verdict, at least in the first phase.
Let me get a final question from you also, Yashwant Deshmukh. The youth factor, which was just mentioned, much talked about, is that age demographic which is at work. Bihar has the youngest voter percentage, 22% between 18 and 29. Could that become a big difference in this election?
That could have made a difference, Rajdeep. And also, please keep in mind that the Yuva voter might also be the one voter which largely sits home due to apathy because they don't like either of the fronts giving solution. So some of the vote, youngster vote particularly, which is caste agnostic or process agnostic, might have got excited with the options like Prashant Kishor as well. So we cannot count that out, that some part of this larger turnout could be attributed to him as well. If the larger number of first-time voter, larger number of less than 35 years of the voter has come out to vote.
Thank you all very much for joining us. Clearly, everyone is being very cautious as to what this higher turnout means, but you've given us a sense as to why this is in many ways a landmark election in Bihar. Thank you all very much.